including as chair of Jordan's National Committee for Demining and Rehabilitation, as the president of the Hashemite Charitable Society for Soldiers with Special Needs, and as the president of the Higher Council for Persons with Disabilities. These positions reflect his commitment to mine clearance and promoting disability rights. Prince Mired also has extensive military experience, having trained at the British Royal Military Academy in Sandhurst and having served in the Jordanian Armed Forces as a Special Forces officer and military intelligence officer. He holds a Master of Philosophy degree in Historical Studies from the University of Cambridge and a Master of Arts in International Relations and Strategic Studies from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University, where he also obtained his Bachelor of Arts in International Relations and History. Sir, it's an honor for us to have you to speak on a matter of global, regional, and national importance, and specifically about the opportunities and challenges of implementing the Ottawa Convention in Asia, including in Sri Lanka. The program today is quite straightforward. The lecture will last, I believe, for approximately 20 minutes, and I will then open it up to questions and answers for the remainder of the hour. It is now with great pleasure that I invite His Royal Highness to address us today.
Good evening, everyone. Dr. Panditaratne, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, before I start, I would like to pass on to you, to all of you, the best wishes and greetings of His Majesty King Abdullah II of Jordan and that of the people of Jordan. So best wishes to you all. This is my first time to Sri Lanka, but definitely not my last time. I hope to come back again soon and see more of your beautiful country. I thank you, Dr. Panditaratne, and Lakshman, sorry for mispronouncing, Kadirgamar Institute for this gracious invitation. It is an honor and a privilege to address you this evening on a subject that is near and dear to my heart, the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention, which many of you, I'm sure, have heard as called the Ottawa Treaty or the Mine Ban Treaty. I have come to Colombo first and foremost to congratulate Sri Lanka for its courageous and rightful decision. It has decided that the humanitarian consequences caused by anti-personnel mines outweigh any marginal utility these weapons may have. I welcome Sri Lanka to our family of states parties wholeheartedly. What brings me here before you tonight, however, goes beyond congratulating Sri Lanka. I'm here to address the subject of Asia's opportunities and challenges, or better said, Sri Lanka's role in this regard. As many of you are probably aware, the convention is one of the most widely accepted disarmament and humanitarian treaties in the world. To date, 164 states parties have made the decision to never, under any circumstances, use, stockpile, produce, transfer anti-personnel mines, and to destroy these weapons, and to assist the victims of this unjust instrument of war. Having been born from what was at the time an unprecedented partnership between civil society and governments, the convention entered into force in March of 1999. Last week, the convention celebrated its 19th anniversary. This historical movement of conscience against a weapon that violates key principles of international law due to its indiscriminate nature was a combination of the will of hundreds of NGOs, international organizations, and concerned states the world over that came together to protect lives and limbs. If last week we celebrated 19 years since the entry into force, in December 2017, so just a few months ago, we celebrated 20 years since the convention was adopted. Now, 21 years, 2018, so 21 years ago, in 1997, the civil society movement that drove efforts that resulted in the adoption of the convention was recognized as an important peacemaking actor and was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. The convention that Sri Lanka has joined is truly historic, and I'm sure many of you remember the role that the late Princess Diana played in promoting the landmine cause before she so sadly passed away. Princess Diana had a major role and played a major role in boosting, giving a tremendous boost to the cause. So. The convention signifies the birth of what we now call humanitarian disarmament, a disarmament treaty that aims to end the suffering and casualties caused by this weapon. So what made this convention the fastest adopted disarmament treaty? One crucial element was the inclusion of support to victims of this weapon in the text of the convention, something unheard of prior to the adoption of this instrument, and viewed today as common sense in the development of new disarmament treaties. The convention is truly a trailblazer. If you wonder why this is so, let me cite a few examples. The stigma placed on the use of these weapons is such that the majority of states not party, so those that have not acceded, not party, implement key provisions of the convention, and many have put moratoria in place on their use, production, and transfer. The United States, for example, has indicated it was pursuing measures that would allow it to exceed the convention. The United States has not exceeded, but in spirit, it more or less has in spirit, but it abides by all the articles of the convention practically, as an example. The use of these weapons draws such stark condemnation that it's rarely used by state forces. Efforts put forth by states parties to the convention have led to the destruction of more than 51 million anti-personnel mines. These landmines will never be used again. Of 162 states parties with current stockpiling destruction obligations, only 3 remain in the process of destroying their stockpiled anti-personnel mines. This is really an amazing success story. Millions of square meters of land that were once contaminated by landmines have now been cleared and allowed people to live in safety without the risk of dying or being maimed. Notwithstanding this progress, challenges certainly remain in the implementation of this landmark instrument. The number of new victims, which was steadily decreasing for nearly two decades, has climbed again. In spite of this worrying trend, thanks to the work undertaken by the convention, we understand better than ever the importance of ensuring that our victim assistance efforts be firmly anchored in sustainable, broader national policies, plans, and legal frameworks related to the rights of persons with disabilities. This includes better health, education, employment, development, and poverty reduction measures, etc., etc., etc. Another important challenge that remains is that 33 states have not yet joined. A significant number of those are here in Asia. And it is here that Sri Lanka could help make a difference. With its accession, Sri Lanka has come to occupy its place among states parties and could help drive international efforts to foster this norm in the region. While Sri Lanka is not the sole state in South Asia to have acceded to the convention, it stands proudly amongst the few. There is something very noble about standing with the few. It also puts Sri Lanka in a position of great responsibility. In addition to Sri Lanka, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and the Maldives are members of the convention. However, India, Nepal, and Pakistan remain on the sidelines. Sri Lanka, a mine-affected country that has come to see the effects of landmines, has manifested its vigorous desire to do the right thing for its development and its people by joining this treaty. It now has the opportunity to take a leadership role on this matter in Asia. Sri Lanka can be a leader on the landmine issue for various reasons. First, thanks to its political savviness, by exceeding Sri Lanka, by exceeding Sri Lanka is demonstrating that adopting the convention does not go counter to a state's national security needs. Secondly, for the manner in which Sri Lanka is implementing its mine clearance commitments with a clear strategy and the necessary national ownership to see it through. Thirdly, because by joining, Sri Lanka understands that cooperation and assistance is more than just a nice sentence in the text of the convention. Sri Lanka does not stand alone in its implementation of the convention, but joins a family of states parties that support joint efforts to meet the ambition of a world free of anti-personnel mines. With its accession, Sri Lanka has is positioned to receive technical and financial assistance from those members of the convention that want to see Sri Lanka succeed in achieving its goals and meeting its convention obligations. Lastly, but not least, Sri Lanka's moral and technical leadership can be a catalyst for other states in the region that remain outside the treaty to take steps towards accession. We have called on the Honorable President of Sri Lanka and the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sri Lanka to continue their commitment to the convention by promoting this humanitarian instrument, and in particular its norms in the region, namely with Nepal, which is already complying with a number of provisions under the convention, particularly mine clearance. And so these are Sri Lanka's opportunities for leadership in the convention in Asia. In this role, Sri Lanka is not alone either. This year, the Anti-Personnel Mine Ban Convention is being chaired by Afghanistan, and we all understand the difficult situation that Afghanistan faces with armed non-state actors. Afghanistan and other states parties face security challenges in the implementation of the convention and proliferation of improvised anti-personnel landmines. But this has not deterred Afghanistan. It remains steadfast in its resolve to address landmine contamination and has vowed that under its presidency, it will continue its mine clearance efforts and the promotion of the convention in various fora, including the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. It is the view of the convention that promoting the treaty at this time of its history is the right approach. Countries as states parties to both the convention and the SARC, SAARC, can maintain this issue on the international radar. We count on Sri Lanka on doing its part in promoting this noble instrument in the region. In my invitation to speak to you today, I was asked to draw on Jordan's experience in the convention, and in particular to speak about fulfilling the convention's promise to landmine victims and survivors through wider national disability efforts. This is also part of the challenge that we face. And here we can draw some parallels to the situation that Sri Lanka faces, to that of other states parties. As a state party, Sri Lanka will soon have to report to the convention on any victim assistance efforts it undertakes on behalf of landmine victims and survivors. Sri Lanka should not think that this is an onerous obligation. Sri Lanka is already carrying out efforts to address the needs of persons with disabilities, including landmine survivors who have acquired a disability through obligations acquired under another instrument, the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the CRPD. of which Sri Lanka is also a state party. Being party to both these conventions will largely enable Sri Lanka to benefit from new synergies to integrate efforts to meet both convention obligations. Implementing obligations under both conventions can only result in gains for Sri Lanka. This is a golden opportunity for Sri Lanka to advance on its sustainable development goals, the SDGs, especially those related to health and well-being and gender. In this regard, the convention also stipulates that each state's party in a position to do so shall provide assistance for the care and rehabilitation and social and economic reintegration of mine victims and for mine awareness programs, for mine clearance and related activities, and for the destruction of stockpiled anti-personnel mines. In this respect, the Convention provides greater emphasis on those states that are party to the Convention. One such example is the support provided by the European Union through the Council decision envisaged to assist 10 states parties to implement key decisions such as mine clearance and victim assistance through sponsoring national stakeholder dialogues, and also to promote this instrument and its norm among those states that have not yet joined. Sri Lanka is in a position to benefit of such assistance as other states parties. The fact that I'm speaking to you here today is related to such a decision by the EU Council to promote the norms of the Convention in regions where adherence is low. And I'm extremely grateful and for the warm hospitality and gracious welcome in Sri Lanka. As for my country, Jordan, we are tackling the issue of victim assistance on several fronts. We are trying our best to address the direct needs of our landmine and other ERW survivors on the one hand, and at the same time we are working diligently to promote the rights of people with disabilities in Jordan more broadly. Last year we legislated a new law, law number 20 for the rights of persons with disabilities. This law is the most progressive and human rights-based law in our Middle East region. The articles in the law are cross-cutting and place obligations on most of the government ministries vis-à-vis education, health, diagnostic testing, accessibility, voting, employment, the deinstitutionalization of persons with disabilities, and their integration and inclusion into society, etc., etc., etc. This is how we are dealing with the issue in Jordan, and it is my utmost honor to be leading the charge on these issues back home. Dear friends, I'm here in Sri Lanka accompanied by the director of the Convention's Implementation Support Unit, Juan Carlos Rowan, Leila, who are doing a tremendous job at the ISU. I understand their obligation with supporting, which is tasked with assisting Sri Lanka and the other 163 states parties to understand their obligations under the Convention, including obtaining a better understanding of the tools and resources available. The solidarity shown by Sri Lanka with these states by joining the Convention and its onerous approach to dealing with the contamination is a demonstration, or serious approach to dealing with contamination is a demonstration of its leadership in disarmament in the region. I must here at this juncture recognize the incredible efforts and hard work of the Sri Lankan ICBL, with a special acknowledgement for Mr. Vidya Abhayagunawar, who has been a relentless and amazing campaigner for the cause for many years. Bravo to you, Vidya. Please, Vidya, stand up. I want everyone to give you an applause, round of applause. And lastly, I'm humbled and profoundly honored that I have been given the opportunity to come to Sri Lanka to see firsthand the commitment to mine clearance and the efforts you are undertaking to meet the Convention's obligations. I wish you all the very best in your future endeavors on the landmine issue, and want you to know that we are all in the same boat together, and we're all paddling in the same direction. God bless you all, and God bless the beautiful country of Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prince Mired, for an extremely helpful overview of the Ottawa Convention. It was a lecture that was at once encouraging, but also balanced in its assessment of the positives and the challenges of the convention. You mentioned many positives, and I'll just mention 5 of the ones that you highlighted. You noted, firstly, that the convention is one of the most widely ratified humanitarian treaties with over 150 states parties, and so as a result carries great normative weight. Secondly, you recognize that the treaty embeds an overarching principle of international humanitarian law, which is the principle of distinction between combatants and civilians in conflict. You also observed that the treaty is a defining example of the power of civil society to change norms and to change lives for the better. An example that is very timely in its message of hope and encouragement. Fourthly, you spoke of a very high level of national compliance with legal obligations, and particularly of the obligation to destroy stockpiles of anti-personnel landmines. And lastly, you spoke of the victim-oriented approach of the convention, noting its complementarity with the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, a convention that Sri Lanka ratified in February 2016. On the challenges, you did observe that after many years of a steady decrease, that the number of new victims has begun to climb. And in a regional context, you noted that there are a few states in South Asia that are yet to become party to the convention, including India and Pakistan. And finally, you spoke very inspiringly of Jordanian initiatives and of Sri Lanka's own potential to multiply the impact of the convention, and in particular by showing other countries that there's no necessary conflict or dissonance between the convention and the goal of national security. And you showed that Sri Lanka can actually achieve great things by implementing the obligations within a clear national framework and by promoting the convention in the region. So thank you very much for this incredibly informative presentation. I'd like to open up this session to questions. There are many in the audience who are highly respected and knowledgeable activists. You highlighted one, Mr. Vidya Gunawardena of the Sri Lanka campaign to ban landmines, and we also have academics and policymakers in the room. So before we begin our Q&A session, may I just request everybody to state your name before asking a question, and also that you keep your question brief in order to accommodate as many questions as possible. We have about 20 minutes for Q&A. I might just start on one. I might just start on one question to get us started. You mentioned that there is a high level of compliance, but also a differing level of compliance with the convention. And I wanted to tie that into some of the academic and political commentary that has happened on motivations for ratifying conventions. So there's been a lot of discussion about different motivations for ratifying conventions, sort of international pressure, national political agendas, combination of the two, as you mentioned, getting technical assistance and financial aid. And there's been discussions about what the implications of those different motivations are for the success of the state parties' compliance with the convention. In your view, do these different motivations have any bearing on a state party's eventual level of compliance with a convention, or does it not matter why they acceded to a convention? It's just the fact that they ratified the convention.
Thank you, Doctor. It's this issue of what we call universalization, and is an issue that I've been working on since 2009 as a special envoy, and I have given it a lot of attention, and I've had the great honor and pleasure of traveling the world and visiting a number of countries that were not party to the convention. That are not party to the convention, and to engage with the leaderships of these countries to try to convince them, persuade them that they should give this issue an attention, and to consider universalization, consider joining acceding to the convention. Haven't always been successful, but in many of the countries that I visited, I didn't expect to be successful. I didn't expect the countries to immediately, of course, to accede. But the engagement, we believe that the engagement was very important. For instance, I visited South Korea, I visited the United States, and a number of other countries, which I knew, of course, with open eyes that they would not, of course, accede to the convention right away. But the question of engagement was very important, and engaging at the very high level. And when this whole idea of engagement at the high level, it was first proposed in 2009, that we should try our level best to engage these states parties that did not accede, to engage them at the very highest of levels. We realized that there was a lot of grassroots work. NGOs and other entities were doing a lot of grassroots work and campaigning, and the ICBL has always done tremendous work. But we realized that there was no engagement at the very highest of levels, and so we thought, well, it needs to be from down up and from up down, and then during these visits that I made to a number of countries, we came to realize that many of the states parties many of the states not party to the convention had really never thought about the landmine issue. Many have not really thought about the landmine issue, or it was never really on the radar. The 33 countries that have not acceded to the landmine convention, you can more or less put them in different categories. There are some that have never really thought about it, or it's never really been an issue, and they don't think it is really an important issue to give any attention to. Other countries have quite an established opinion on the issue. Some maybe are sitting on the fence, maybe with the right persuasion, with the right type of engagement. They will hopefully in the future come on board, and some I think maybe will never accede to the convention, unfortunately. But of course, it's our role and our goal to try to convince as many countries, because all states have a voice. All states can establish their mark and make their opinions heard, and this is why we are so excited to have Sri Lanka come on board, and because we want to hear Sri Lanka's story in the conventions, the meetings on conferences that we have on the landmine issue. We want to hear the Sri Lanka story. We want to hear your story. We want others to hear your story. And it's important that the people around the world hear your voice. So that's why that's the reason I'm here, and that's the reason I'm doing the work that I'm doing. So thank you.
Thank you very much. As it's about meeting states where they are in terms of support and trying to build on that, both from ground up and yes, at a higher level. Thank you. May I open it up to other questions?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I am Asanga from Mired, Empowers People with Disabilities. And you mentioned during your speech, lecture, the connection between the UNCRPD and this Ottawa Convention, as well as the Sustainable Development Goals. And in countries like developing countries like Sri Lanka, so there's a huge challenge to implement the Sustainable Development Goal and incorporate the needs and issues of persons with disabilities. Because we see that there's a great lacking of the overall coordination mechanism in the countries like us. How do we, it's a challenge for a country like us. How do we face these kind of challenges to coordinate all these issues with the Sustainable Development Goal as well as the overall development plan of the country? How do we meet these challenges? Thank you very much.
That's a very difficult question. With a lot of patience. You know, there are many, my country, we're in the same situation back home. This is what you have just asked is exactly what I'm facing back home. And it's my biggest challenge and my biggest headache, to tell you the truth. And I'm working on it diligently. As Dr. Panditaratne mentioned, the major portfolio that I'm holding back home at the moment is related to people with disabilities, and I chair the Higher Council for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and it's a body that we have created. It's a government body that we have created in Jordan, and it's a policy think tank for disability issues. And so it's my job and the job of the people that I have in my council at the Higher Council to think up strategies and policies for the rights of persons with disabilities and all across the board, like I mentioned in my speech, in health and education, employment, and we work with all our ministries. We work with all our ministries, and we hold them to account. So we agree with the ministries. For instance, our Ministry of Education, we agree with our Ministry of Education what the policies should be on inclusive education, and we support the ministry with the technical know-how. And then we hold the ministry to account and monitor what the ministry is doing. Likewise with our other ministries. For instance, on accessibility, we do that with our Ministry of Public Health and with the municipality of Greater Amman, our capital, as well as the Ministry of Tourism and the Ministry of Transport and Public Works. We agree with them. Work with them, and at the same time, when they implement, we hold them to account to make sure that they're doing what they're doing. It's very difficult work. It's tough work. There are no shortcuts, and I think the main thing is to have the right people in place and to develop a plan. And once you develop a plan, to try to implement the plan at the highest of levels. And it's a process. It takes time. It takes time. You know, I get very jealous when I travel to Europe in particular, or to the United States or Canada, and I see the sophistication when it comes to the services that they provide for people with disabilities. And in Europe and in the West, they take it, in a sense, take it for granted. You know, that all the pavements are accessible, the buildings are accessible, the toilets are accessible, the education is inclusive. People with disabilities are not put into institutions but are integrated into society, and you know, and this you know, this has the European countries have achieved all this success, but after a lot of hard work. It hasn't come easily either, and so we just have to roll up our sleeves and try to do the best job we can, and support each other, and sometimes a small little idea can snowball into something big. I give you an example. I was a few years ago in New York, and I took part in a big conference on disability, and there was a session on the deinstitutionalization of people with disabilities, and I sat in this session, and I was astounded, because I came to realize that we have in Jordan quite a number of institutions for people with disabilities, and they're, as one may imagine, they're quite awful places. And the people with disabilities should not be institutionalized. They should be within the community. And they are our brothers, they are our sisters, they are our neighbors. And so anyway, when I went back home, and I made a point of I made the point that this issue should be a new article should be added to our draft law that we were working on, our law for the rights of persons with disabilities, and boom, 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 now it is law, and we're working on the issue, and hopefully within the next few years, all people with disabilities will be out of our institutions and integrated back into society. So it's, it's a process, and it takes time, but nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible. It can be done, so.
Thank you. Thank you for highlighting the role, first you mentioned, of think tanks. That was an interesting observation. And you mentioned, Your Royal Highness, the phrase holding policymakers to account several times, that you use that phrase quite often. I was wondering if you could just elaborate on the process by which you hold the institutions to account. Is it through sort of private, sort of regular meetings? What happens when they don't meet the expectations? Then do you have some sort of alternative ways? What is the process?
And of course, in every country it's different. In Jordan, we've set up the system whereby, as the president of the Higher Council for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, I have a direct link to the Prime Minister. So, in a sense, I can, whenever it is needed, I can meet with the Prime Minister and raise any issue. In addition to that, we have every year have to present a report to our cabinet, and of course the report has to be as honestly and blatantly honest as possible, and and all our ministers know that, and know that I will not shy away and will not sugarcoat the report if I don't have to. So.
And the cabinet reports are public?
Yes, according to our new law, all of this is to be transparent and to be made public, and so in order for the public also to gain confidence in the work that we're doing. So. Thank
you. We have 1, 2, maybe we'll take a couple of questions at a time, 3 questions. Mrs. Asya Withem, State Secretary, will you please go first, and then...
Thank you very much for your comprehensive presentation. And I have 3 questions. One is about national implementation. Number 2, achieving universality. And number 3 is about non-state parties. And first one is about national implementation. Because you said that you have 162 state parties and 33 are outside the convention. And just because they are members of the convention, that doesn't mean that it adds to the universality campaign, because they should fully implement the convention. So what is the kind of support that you are giving towards national implementation to the states parties? Number 2 is about universality. Now, 33 countries are outside the convention. And you said that you have been talking to the political leadership of non-state parties. And what are the incentives that you give to encourage non-state parties to join the convention? Number 3 is about non-state actors. How do you target them and making them responsible to follow the objectives of this convention? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam. Regarding implementation, of course, in order for the convention to be universalized, of course, all countries have to implement the articles of the convention. Regarding the support, it doesn't come automatically. It doesn't come automatically. Again, I say there are no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts. But the countries that show ownership, like Sri Lanka, the countries that are serious about the issue, like Sri Lanka, are the countries that are more likely to receive support by the donor community, by the states parties that are in a position to support. And and I'm talking here from experience. When I started on the issue in 2004, when I was appointed as our chairman for our National Committee for Demining and Rehabilitation, I had no money at all in my account and the account of the committee. And to an extent, I really I couldn't even, at one point, I couldn't even pay the salaries of the staff that I had. But I basically gathered all the staff together and I told them, look, we have to do things properly. We have to do things according to the book. The ABCs of management are very well known. We have to be accountable. We have to be transparent. We have to work professionally. There are no secrets. Everything should be completely transparent. We have to gain the confidence of the donor community. And we have to develop a plan that can easily be implemented, not a plan that is up in the air, but a plan that can be implemented in a right way. And so that's basically what we did. And once we did all of this, the donor community came around and realized that we were serious. Realized that we were going to achieve our by hook or by crook, we were going to achieve our goals, and from 2004 until 2008, 2009, we had tremendous support from over 22, 23 different donor states, and literally every project, every proposal that we submitted to the donor community, we were afforded the funding. And it was really, really amazing. Of course, then after the 2008, after the international financial crisis, things took a downhill a little. And it's really because it's all about confidence, and it's all about trust, and it's all about credibility, and this is all of this you have in Sri Lanka, and I'm very sure and certain that there will be support because the political will is there. And one very important aspect also is the political will and the ownership from the very top. The countries that have ownership of the problem and show the political will right from the very top are the countries that are doing really well and are succeeding. There are many countries, the states parties that, for instance, a junior officer or the national director of the authority is championing the cause, but nobody else is listening, or nobody else is supporting, or you have a general in the army who's championing the cause, but nobody else is really pushing in the same direction. Or you might have a minister in one country that is trying, but no one else is maybe really supporting the cause. But in the countries where the leadership is engaged and everyone is pushing in the same direction, like Sri Lanka, these are the countries that will succeed, because this is really what the donor community is looking for. That countries that are taking the issue seriously and countries that will definitely achieve results. So that's the first point. The second point was, universalization. Yeah. Could you just remind me again? My memory is, what was? The incentives for universalizing, or for joining the convention. One which I think is important is that sooner or later, donor fatigue is going to take place. Sooner or later, it's just a matter of time. Donor states are going to say, enough. We have been supporting the landmine cause for a long time. We want to support something else. So that's very important. So countries that need support from the donor community, it's the faster you can join, the better, because already there are signs of donor fatigue. Already there are some countries that want to move on to something else. So that's one issue. But also it's the more in my very humble opinion, it's not a military decision. It's not a military decision to join. It's more a moral decision. Do we want to live in a country that has weapons that are so despicable and that end up maiming and killing innocent children, men and women? Do we want to live in a world like that? And what do you say? What do you say to a mother whose child has lost his or her eyes or limbs? What do you say as a responsible person in government? What do you say? Sorry? Sorry is not enough. Sorry doesn't cut it. And so it's a despicable weapon that we all need to ban, and all countries need to join. And so these are some of the arguments. I have, of course, other arguments, but these are I would say the two main arguments. It's we don't want to live in a world that has this such a despicable weapon that's indiscriminate. So. No, non-state actors. Of course, what we hold as we hold countries to account, also we hold non-state actors to account. I mean, everybody has to, in a sense, abide by the norms of the convention. Of course, there have been some non-state actors that have abided by the norms of the convention. But there are other non-state actors around the world, terrorist organizations, and that do not. It's a very difficult issue. It's a very sensitive issue. It's not a very easy issue to work on. But basically, everyone has to abide by the convention. And so, thank you, Madam.
Thank you. And with non-state actors, I guess there's also a structural difficulty in international law with only nation states being able to ratify conventions. We have time for a couple more questions. I think there were earlier Ganesh and yes, and we'll try and get the last question over there. So Ganesh, we'll take all of them first, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Ganesh Vignaraja from the Institute. How serious are the economic costs of not demining? That's the first question. Second question is there interest from international foundations such as the Gates Foundation in supporting demining efforts? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. So then there are some Asian regional giants like China, India, and Pakistan. So while those countries are not state parties to this important convention, how this is going to be an opportunity or challenges to other countries in Asia? This question, thank you.
And China in particular?
All regions, China, India, and Pakistan, they're not state party. So how we can see this? Is it going to be an opportunity or a challenges to Asian countries?
Right.
Thank you.
And then the last question.
Hi, good evening. Alistair Moyer, the Country Director for MAG in Sri Lanka. You eloquently provided a global overview of how the Mine Ban Treaty has been so widely adopted and the impact this continues to make. Completion timelines naturally vary, and the government of Sri Lanka has set a target for 2020 with only 27 square kilometres remaining to be cleared. How would you compare the remaining threat in Sri Lanka to what other nations are facing?
Okay, so we have a question on the economic aspects from the chair of the Global Economy Program, and a question on basically incentivizing non-state parties in Asia, and the three you mentioned are also major landmine producers as well. And the last question on sort of a comparative assessment of Sri Lanka's situation.
On the first question of cost, Of course, it is costly to demine, but the cost is nothing if you weigh it out. The damage that the landmines can do, and the lives that can be lost, and the people that can be maimed. The argument that it's very costly, of course, it is made often, but it's more important for a country to safeguard the lives of its people. Number one, I mean, there is a responsibility on every country to safeguard the life of its people and to promote development. Of course, cost is an issue, but the lives of people are more important. Regarding the Gates Foundation and the private sector, it is one issue that has always perplexed me in a way that for some reason, and I haven't really understood why, I've been working on this issue for 14 years and I haven't really understood why, but that the private sector, corporate Asia, corporate Europe, corporate America, has not really been engaged on this issue, and it's I'm really not sure what the answer to that is. It ought to be. I mean, of course, the corporate world is very engaged on many other causes. I mean, the fight against malaria or the fight against AIDS or many other noble causes. But for some reason, on the landmine cause, hasn't really been engaged, and I wish we could do something to engage the corporate world much more. Regarding India and China and Pakistan, and you never know. Maybe today, they're not willing to accede. Tomorrow there could be a change of government and things change, and sim salabim, and boom, they decide to change, to accede. And for instance, we had in 2007, we were very pleasantly surprised when we found out that Kuwait and Iraq, the two countries that had been at war, decided to accede together. At the same time, they decided to accede, and which was we were astounded because we never thought it would happen. So one never knows. Countries that have a very hard stance on accession at the moment. Things might change, and the leaderships might change. The views on the matter might change. And I come back to this issue that many of the leaderships of these countries have never been engaged on landmines. I will bet you that a number of the countries on the list, a good number, their leaders, whether the presidents or prime ministers, have never considered the issue of landmines, and nobody has talked to them about landmines. And so that's part of the problem. That's part of there's engagement down below, and diplomats in Geneva talk about it, and bureaucrats talk about it. But for many of the leaderships or leaders around the world, it's never been discussed. And this is one issue Juan Carlos and I have been talking about. How can we, especially not this year, next year we have a big review conference, and we have for the landmine for the Ottawa Treaty, and we're talking about what we can do, what buzz we can generate to get leaders to address to engage with leaders and get them to pay attention to this issue. But you never say never. It might. Hopefully, we can get more countries on board. And the last question was regarding the threat, and of course, it's for every country to make their own assessment, and it's not for me to dictate. It's not for me to say whether it's a good enough space of time, or it should be longer or should be shorter. Of course, it's every country's responsibility to make that determination whether the time is enough or should be more or should be less. Of course, it's preferable. It's preferable that the time be shorter, It's wonderful. Hopefully, if Sri Lanka is able to finish by 2020, that's music to our ears. Of course, Sri Lanka has according to the convention, has a 10-year period by which it has to abide by the Article 5 and do the clearance. But if Sri Lanka can finish earlier, that's all the better. So we look forward to hearing some great news from Sri Lanka in the near future. And please know that you have a friend in Jordan to help and assist you on this cause. So thank you all very much.
Can we indulge in just one last question, please, right up the back?
My name is Nilasi Liyanage. I'm from the Faculty of Law, University of Colombo, and I'm volunteering with the Sri Lanka campaign to ban landmines. My question to your Royal Highness is, it's commonly acknowledged that females become doubly victimized because of landmines, since it prevents them from carrying out their day-to-day activities and also in preventing them from accessing victim assistance. So in terms of taking these gender perspectives into account, what has been the progress so far globally and maybe even regionally? Thank you.
On gender issues related to demining and related to the landmine issue, good question. I'm not sure I have an answer for you, but maybe my colleague Juan Carlos can answer your question in a better way. But what you said regarding causing a double disability or the effects being more severe or acute for women, I think that is quite correct. And I know people around the world where in areas. In most countries, most mine-affected countries, landmines are laid in the ground or in the ground along the border areas. And in most countries, these border areas are areas that are farming areas, are agricultural areas, and for the most part, it's poor women and children and young boys who are the victims. And it's tragic. It's really, really tragic. And it's especially tragic when you know that all of these accidents could have been avoided, should have been avoided. I come back and say it's the responsibility of every government, every mine-affected government, to look after its people. That's the number one responsibility of every government, to look after its people and to safeguard the lives of its people. So it's when you have, I have a terrible I have a hate, disgust of landmines, because I have many friends. I know many people back home in my country who are landmine victims, and they're my friends, and I see the hardships that they face on a daily basis, and when you think that it all could have been avoided and their lives could have been totally different, it's really quite tragic, and so we all have to do what we must to make our lands free and safe of landmines. And it's a doable cause. This is what also attracts me to this issue, that it's doable. If it's a cause that can be done. And some countries might have to spend more money. It might take a longer time. It might take a bigger effort. But inevitably, it can be done. Countries like Afghanistan. Afghanistan, it's going to take Afghanistan many years until it's mine-free. Iraq, the same thing. Cambodia, Angola. There are a number of countries that are extremely contaminated. And it's going to take them, I don't know how many years, but it's decades maybe until they're mine-free. And how many people are going to lose their lives until that happens, until they're mine-free? Landmines are the presence of landmines, or the history of landmines. It's a stain. It's a stain on humanity. If you consider the amount of money that countries spent on the manufacturing of landmines, on the mining landmines, placing landmines in the ground, on demining, it's millions and millions and tens, hundreds of millions of dollars that humanity has wasted, and when all that money could have been spent on education, could have been spent on other issues. So it's a stain on humanity. The history of landmines it's just terrible. So thank you all so much. Thank you. It's been lovely being here with you this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Prince Mired, for answering all of those questions with such thoughtfulness and highlighting the key factors for this whole important project to succeed, including high-level engagement and engagement of all the different levels of society in committing people to the cause, in proper planning, in transparency and accountability, in the way in which we proceed, and of course both of those are related. The importance of continued funding, particularly state funding, given that foundations and the private sector seem less interested, and of gender sensitivity. So a lot of really interesting and important perspectives were raised in the discussion. On behalf of the Institute and also of our partner, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I would like to express our sincere appreciation to you, despite a packed schedule, including a visit to the north of Sri Lanka this morning. You've graciously given of your time to discuss the challenges and possibilities of a mine-free Asia. And you've really provided a richer understanding of the Ottawa Convention, which was unfamiliar to many of us, and including Sri Lanka's own potential for leadership on the convention. Thank you very much also to members of the audience who participated in the discussion, to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for their excellent organizational support, Vidya Abegunawardena for contributing an important document which is in your folders today, to LKI's Board of Management and my hard-working colleagues at LKI. Thank you all for being here today, and I'd like to invite you now to join us on the veranda for cake and tea. Thank you.